I know you wanted to talk about education matters, but first we obviously have to talk to you about the Channel tragedies and what can be done to stop them. What's your viewpoint?
As you say, what we've seen is an absolute tragedy. It's heartbreaking to see people losing their lives in this way. I think what is essential is that we see action to crack down on the criminal gangs that are exploiting people and are driving so much of this misery. Under the Conservatives, we've seen a fall in the number of convictions of these people smugglers, and that needs to change. We also need to make sure that we're dealing with the backlog that we're facing at the moment. We're not processing cases quickly. That's leading to that backlog, and it's meaning that all too often people are being housed in completely unsuitable accommodation like hotels.
Well, Bridget, your shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock's done a very interesting piece in today's Sunday Mirror where he seems to flash his garter a bit about what Labour would plan to do. And one of those things, he said, is a new returns deal with the European Union. Kevin Saunders, who works for Border Force, told us earlier that's about as likely as platting fog. And another thing he mentions here is to ensure genuine refugees can contribute to Britain, which I'm assuming means quicker access to work visas. So cozying up to the EU and guaranteeing more cheap labour for Britain. This sounds like a backdoor Brexit.
No, we do need a returns agreement. That's part of the problem that we've got at the moment, that we don't. So we absolutely need to negotiate that deal and get a deal around returns. Where it comes to decisions being taken, people are waiting a very, very long time at the moment for decisions to be taken where it comes to asylum claims. Now, for those who have a genuine case to remain in the UK, that's unfair because we should be processing those cases quickly. Many have been through incredible trauma and terrible events in their lives. And for those who don't have a right to be here, we need decisions quickly so that we can make sure that people are returned to their home country or to the third country from which they may have come. Brilliant. So it's all about having a fairer system that deals with cases quickly. I've seen lots of cases as a Member of Parliament where you're talking about people waiting years even to get an interview, to have their case heard and to have it dealt with. I think that is just not sustainable. Yeah.
Bridget, I just want to push you on that point. You've made it clear that fast-tracking the asylum process is a policy. I want to push you on this point, though. Ensuring genuine refugees can contribute to Britain, that means work visas for asylum seekers, doesn't it? Is that something you'd support?
Well, once people have had their case determined and it's clear that they have a right to be in this country, then yes, they will have the opportunity to work and to play a full part in our society. Many people who've been through that process have got a lot of skills and a lot that they could offer our country. At the moment, they're languishing in hotels, in unsuitable accommodation, and it's years, it's costing us all a fortune as a country because of the government's total failure to process cases quickly and effectively. It's not fair for those people who are waiting for cases to be heard, and it's not fair for the rest of the country either.
I think there's no doubt, is there, that this is going to be a very big election issue. So when are we going to hear exactly what Labour would do, which would actually sound convincing?
Well, if we win the next election, if the British people put their trust in us, we'll inherit a completely broken asylum and immigration system. Everything that we're talking about now is down to 13 years of complete failure from the government to actually deal with any of this. Labour's plan is making sure that we are tackling the criminal gangs that are exploiting people, that we get a cross-border policing unit to do that, that we do get returns to the European Union, to France and other countries, and also that we do move away from ending hotel use, which is costing millions of pounds every day, and dealing with the backlog of cases that we've got at the moment. We've got a huge backlog, cases are not being processed, and that isn't sustainable.
But Bridget, a returns deal with the EU, as I explained, we spoke to a former chief of Border Force who just says that simply won't work. There's no incentive for the European Union to take these people back. They've done nothing to stop them leaving. We've spent £500 million, £500 million with the French, and yet yesterday still happened, and no doubt more disasters will continue to happen. So I put it to you again. You know, what's a Labour going to do to actually stop the boats arriving in the first place?
The only answer has to be more effective working with our international partners, and that includes the French. That's why we've said we would end the unworkable and unethical Rwanda scheme, and we would put the money that was saved from that into delivering a cross-border policing unit to make sure that we are working effectively with our international partners, but also that we're cracking down on the criminal gangs that do exploit people. And, you know, we see the direct consequence of those gangs and the tragedies that we see in the Channel. Under this government, prosecutions have fallen. I mean, crime is, you know, prosecutions of all crime crime right across our country have fallen, but that also applies to the criminal gangs who are making money out of human misery, and they are running rings around this government.
OK, well, you're also here to talk about education this morning, of course, and the all-important issue of excessive spending on supply teachers due to recruitment gaps. Now, my missus is a teacher. She says quite a lot of teachers are going to the supply side of things because they're demoralised, they're fed up of the profession, and they find that being a supply teacher works quite well for them because they get paid more, and yet they don't have all the politics or the homework. So is this something that's a viable solution? How much would it cost?
Absolutely. The experience that you're just describing there is what I hear the length and breadth of the country, that teachers are increasingly feeling demoralised, undervalued, not appreciated for what they're doing, and that workload pressures are driving lots and lots of teachers out of the profession. We have to re-establish teaching as a really valued and respected profession in our country. And Labour's plans would deliver more teachers into our classrooms. We would end the tax breaks that private schools enjoy and put that money into recruiting more teachers. But alongside that, all of the different incentive payments and bursaries that are currently available, we want to simplify that to make it more effective in keeping teachers in the classroom. But also at the end of 2 years, when teachers have done their early career framework, where they've done extra training and have invested in their professionalism, we want to recognise that with an extra payment at the end of that too. But we do need to deal with some of the wider challenges in our schools too, and I think young people's mental health and some of those wider pressures in society are part of that bigger picture that means that lots of teachers feel it's just they can't stay within teaching, and I want to make teaching a really attractive place for people to work once more.
Yes, teaching, I mean, we need teachers, and you're planning to recruit an additional 6,500 teachers. How will you, though, change that morale completely? How will you incentivise young people coming out of university into teaching?
Well, education will be a really big priority for the next Labour government if we win that election. And I want to make sure that teachers are valued and respected. What I hear across the country when I've spoken to lots of teachers and school leaders is that often they've felt belittled by this government, that they don't feel they've been treated with respect. But alongside that too, that they're being asked to deal with lots of wider problems within society, and they're just not able to do that. So we would put extra support into our schools around mental health. Lots of young people are struggling with that at the moment. And in our primary schools, we would deliver breakfast clubs for every primary school child in England. So making sure that children get a really good start to the day. But also we know that the evidence backs up the fact that where breakfast clubs are effective is actually also in driving up attendance and leading to better academic outcomes for children too. So all of that together, dealing with the workload pressures, making sure that teachers are respected and valued, and actually putting education right at the heart of national life once more. I think all of that, and there'll be much more besides it, will mark a real step change in how we approach things from government.
Well, education, education, education. It sounds like Tony Blair all over again. Of course, he was recently on stage with your man Keir Starmer. All sounds great on paper. The big difference this time, of course, is you've got no money. You've got to inherit a £2.6 trillion national debt. At least Blair had a few quid in the coffers. These plans sound great, but how are you going to bankroll them?
I mean, you're absolutely right that the fiscal inheritance of a Labour government, if we're fortunate enough to win power, will be really, really challenging, far beyond anything that the incoming Labour government experienced in '97. And we have seen what's happened when the Conservatives crashed the economy, and what happens when you don't have serious plans about how you'll manage the economy and taking a responsible approach. That's why everything that we set out, we've got a plan behind it about how we're going to pay for it and the costs running alongside it. So we would put more teachers into our classrooms by ending the tax breaks that private schools enjoy. The evidence is clear that would raise considerable sums of money that we can invest in state education. So for me, it's also a question of priorities. If the vast majority of our children go to state schools, we could raise that money by ending tax breaks on private schools to deliver a better education, more teachers, better mental health support for all of our children.
OK, Bridget, fine. What would you say to people who say this sounds like the politics of envy? Because not everybody who goes to a private school is a toff or goes to a place like Eton or isn't a massively wealthy overseas student. A great many aspirational middle-class parents put everything into private education. They just about can afford to survive because they want the best for their child. Those are the kind of children that will be forced out of the private sector if Labour scraps the tax breaks. And it will put those kids back into the state system. It won't affect the richest, who will continue to pay the extortionate fees. So this tax on aspiration actually it hammers those who are striving hard to make ends meet to get the best for their children. This is a tax on aspiration from the Labour Party.
I think the vast majority of people in our country who send their children to state schools are also aspirational, ambitious, and they want the best for their children too. I won't ever criticise individual parents for the choices that they make, and I have no problem if parents choose to opt for a private school. There are sometimes lots of reasons why parents will do that. But my priority as Secretary of State for Education in that Labour government will be to drive up standards in our state schools. And I think ending the tax breaks on private schools is a straightforward and relatively modest measure that would allow us to do more, to get more teachers into our classrooms, to deliver better outcomes for all of our children.